For 13 months, people around Point Pleasant, West Virginia, reported something impossible: a tall figure near an abandoned explosives plant, wings that seemed to unfold without moving, two red lights where a face should have been. Some witnesses said it followed their cars. Others simply felt that something terrible was coming. Then, on December 15th, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed into the Ohio River. 46 people died, and after that night, the famous wave of Mothman sightings seemed to end. That made the conclusion irresistible. The creature had come to warn them. But buried inside the original sightings is another possibility, one that may be worse than a monster. The modern Mothman has become one of America's most recognizable cryptids. It is usually shown as a muscular humanoid with enormous moth-like wings, claws, antennae, and burning red eyes. In movies, artwork, and internet stories, it appears before disasters as either a warning or a supernatural messenger. But that is not exactly what the first witnesses described. On the night of November 15th, 1966, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Millette were driving near an abandoned World War II munitions facility outside Point Pleasant. Locals called the area the TNT plant. Near one of the old structures, they saw something tall and dark. The newspaper account published the following day did not confidently call it a moth, demon, or supernatural being. Its headline described something far less certain: a man-sized bird, a creature, something. The witnesses reported red reflecting eyes and large wings. They said it rose into the air and followed their car as they fled toward town. The name Mothman came afterward, and almost everything the creature would eventually mean came later still. The location matters. The West Virginia Ordnance Works had been built during the Second World War to manufacture explosives. After the war, much of the complex was abandoned. Concrete bunkers remained scattered through the landscape, surrounded by woods, ponds, service roads, and industrial ruins. At night, it was a place where ordinary distances became difficult to judge. A bird standing near a road could appear much larger in headlights. Reflective eyes could seem self-luminous. Wings opening suddenly could erase the familiar shape of the body beneath them, and fear would do the rest. But the TNT area was not merely spooky scenery. It was a contaminated industrial landscape with restricted structures, underground storage areas, and the physical remains of wartime production. It already represented something unsettling: dangerous history left behind after its original purpose had been forgotten. The witnesses did not encounter their creature in an untouched wilderness. They encountered it inside the ruins of human industry. That detail would become strangely important. Later illustrations gave Mothman a clear head, long arms, claws, and the body of a supernatural humanoid. The early descriptions were less stable. Some witnesses emphasized the creature's size. Others remembered wings, a strange way of moving, or intensely reflective eyes. Not every account described the same anatomy. Even the famous red eyes may not have been eyes glowing from within. Animal eyes can reflect headlights or flashlights, producing bright colors in darkness. The exact color depends on the animal, angle, distance, and light source. A large bird was therefore an obvious explanation. A wildlife biologist suggested the sandhill crane, a tall bird with a wide wingspan and reddish skin around its eyes. Others have proposed herons or large owls. An unfamiliar bird seen briefly at night could become something almost human, especially after the community had already heard the story. But no single bird explanation fits every reported detail perfectly. A crane does not explain every witness's impression of a human-shaped torso. An owl does not easily match every estimate of height, and frightened observers are notoriously poor at judging size and speed under bad lighting. That uncertainty kept the story alive. Yet the sightings were about to change from reports of an unidentified animal into something much larger. Once newspapers carried the story, people began looking for Mothman. More reports followed. Strange lights were discussed. Unusual sounds and missing animals were connected to the creature. Ordinary events began entering the same expanding pattern. This does not mean the witnesses were lying. Expectation can change what people notice without causing them to invent an experience deliberately. Once a community learns the shape of a possible threat, ambiguous sights begin to arrive already labeled. A shadow is no longer simply a shadow. It is where the creature was standing. Two reflected lights are no longer an animal's eyes. They are the eyes everyone has been describing. And when several people report similar experiences, each new account seems to confirm the ones before it. But confirmation moves in both directions. Earlier stories also teach later witnesses what they are expected to see. Point Pleasant was no longer dealing with one strange encounter, it was living inside a feedback loop. And then another figure entered the story. Journalist and paranormal author John Keel arrived in the area and began collecting reports. Keel was not investigating only an unknown bird. He connected the Mothman sightings with UFO reports, mysterious telephone calls, alleged precognitive experiences, and encounters with strange visitors later associated with Men in Black. In Keel's interpretation, the events were not isolated, they were part of a broader pattern. His 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies, became the version most people now recognize. It framed the Point Pleasant events as something approaching a warning, a series of disturbing signals surrounding a disaster that had not yet occurred. But there is a crucial difference between a strange event being followed by a catastrophe and a clear warning being delivered before it. A warning contains useful information. It identifies the danger, the place, or the time. It gives someone a chance to act. The Mothman sightings did none of those things. No documented message told authorities to close the Silver Bridge. No reliable prediction identified December 15th. No reported detail pointed investigators toward a corroding eye bar inside the bridge's suspension chain. The connection became powerful only after the bridge fell. At approximately 5 o'clock on December 15th, 1967, the Silver Bridge was crowded with rush hour and holiday traffic. The structure connected Point Pleasant, West Virginia, with the Ohio side of the river. When one critical component failed, the bridge's suspension system could not redistribute the load. The collapse was rapid. Vehicles and sections of the bridge fell into the cold water below. 46 people were killed. The official investigation did not find evidence of a creature, sabotage, or supernatural intervention. It traced the disaster to a fracture in a single eye bar, a load-bearing steel link in the suspension chain. A small flaw had grown through stress corrosion and corrosion fatigue during the bridge's roughly 40-year life. Worse, the crucial damage was effectively hidden from ordinary visual inspection. That is the detail that changes the entire Mothman story. While people were scanning the sky for a red-eyed figure, the real threat was already present. It was not flying above Point Pleasant. It was inside the bridge. The Silver Bridge had been designed in the 1920s, when vehicles were generally lighter and traffic demands were different. Its suspension chains used eye bars connected by large pins. Unlike systems containing many redundant wires, this design depended on a relatively small number of major structural elements. If one critical link failed, there was little capacity to prevent a wider collapse. The danger was microscopic compared with the bridge around it, a flaw only a fraction of an inch deep developing in steel that appeared solid from the outside. No red eyes, no wings, no scream in the darkness. Just metal weakening slowly under repeated loads while thousands of people crossed above it. That may be the most frightening contradiction in the story. Mothman was visible enough to become a legend. The real killer was almost impossible to see. And because the creature appeared before the collapse, human memory naturally placed the two events into a single chain. The sightings came first, the disaster came second. Therefore, the first must have meant the second. But sequence alone is not prophecy. There are at least 3 strong ways to understand what happened in Point Pleasant. The first is supernatural. Witnesses encountered something unknown that appeared around a future catastrophe. This explanation preserves the emotional power of the legend, but it has a major weakness. The alleged warning was too vague to prevent anything. The second is zoological. At least some witnesses saw large birds under poor conditions. Cranes, herons, or owls could account for height, wings, flight, and reflected eyes. But different sightings may have involved different animals, mistakes, or experiences. There is no reason every report must have one cause. The third explanation is folkloric and psychological. A dramatic initial encounter entered a small community. Newspapers gave it a recognizable shape. Repetition made the creature easier to perceive. Then a real tragedy gave all the earlier uncertainty a final meaning. Under this explanation, Mothman did not predict the bridge collapse. The bridge collapse created the prophetic Mothman. Before December 15th, It was a mysterious winged creature. After December 15th, it had always been a warning. This brings us back to the beginning. The strangest part of the original story was never that a monster appeared near Point Pleasant. It was where the monster appeared. The TNT area and the Silver Bridge had something in common. Both were products of an earlier industrial age. Both contained dangers ordinary people could not easily evaluate. One had been abandoned after manufacturing explosives. The other continued carrying traffic while a hidden flaw grew inside a critical component. Mothman became the face of fear because a face is easier to fear than a system. A creature can be watched. It can be chased, photographed, named, and blamed. Corrosion cannot. Structural fatigue does not stare back from the trees. It offers no dramatic silhouette. It simply accumulates until the object everyone trusts suddenly fails. The sightings may have hidden something worse, because they gave the town a visible mystery, while an invisible danger was developing in plain sight. Maybe some witnesses saw an unusual bird. Maybe others saw something that still cannot be reconstructed. And perhaps, for those willing to believe it, something truly unknown passed through Point Pleasant. But Mothman did not need to break the Silver Bridge to become part of the disaster. Human memory did that afterward. It transformed scattered fear into a warning, coincidence into prophecy, and an unclear shape in the darkness into something that seemed easier to understand than the truth. Because the worst monster in Point Pleasant was never the thing people could see. It was the failure they couldn't.